My parents said I had to gift my lake house to my golden child brother or be disowned. I chose option 3. Sell it to developers 72 hours before his wedding without telling anyone. Hi everyone. Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. Initial post. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am at 33, sitting in what used to be my grandfather's study, trying to process how my family pushed me to this point. My name is Michael, and what I'm about to do will likely destroy my relationship with my family forever. I've accepted that. In fact, I've embraced it. Let me give you the background. My grandfather, William, was a self-made man who built a successful construction business from nothing. He wasn't wealthy by billionaire standards, but he did well enough to own several properties, including a stunning lake house in northern Michigan that became the heart of our family's memories. Every summer, every major holiday, every celebration happened at that lake house. 4 bedrooms, a private dock, situated on 12 acres of pristine waterfront property, it was paradise. When Grandpa passed 5 years ago, he left very specific instructions in his will. The family business and main assets went to my father, James, as the eldest son. Some investment properties went to my aunts. But the lake house, that went to me. Just me. Not my parents, not my younger brother Christopher, but specifically to me. The will explained why. Throughout my childhood and teenage years, I was the one who spent every possible moment with Grandpa at that property. While my brother was at soccer camps and my parents traveled for work, I was there learning to fish, maintain the boats, repair the dock, and care for the land. I helped him renovate the kitchen when I was 16. I rebuilt the deck with him when I was 20. When his health declined, I was the one who drove up every weekend to check on him, make repairs, and ensure he could stay in his beloved home as long as possible. Christopher, my younger brother, visited maybe twice a year. My parents, James and Patricia, came up for the 4th of July and sometimes Christmas, always complaining about the drive, the lack of high-speed internet, the rustic atmosphere. They tolerated the lake house. I loved it. For the past 5 years, I've poured my heart and money into that property. I modernized the electrical system, installed a new septic system, renovated 2 bathrooms, and restored the vintage boathouse. All told, I've invested over $200,000 of my own money, not counting the countless hours of labor. The property is now worth approximately $1.8 million, though its value to me was immeasurable. Was past tense. Everything changed 6 months ago when Christopher announced his engagement to Jessica. Within days of the announcement, my parents sat me down for what they called a family discussion. They informed me, not asked, informed, that I would be gifting the lake house to Christopher as a wedding present. Not lending it for the wedding, not hosting the wedding there, but actually transferring ownership to him. Their reasoning: Christopher needs it more than you do. You're single, you have a good job, you can afford to buy another place. This would mean everything to him and Jessica. It's what family does. I laughed at first, thinking they were joking. They weren't. When I refused, the campaign began. Daily phone calls from my mother crying about how I was ruining Christopher's future. Text messages from my father about family obligation and not being selfish. Christopher himself would send me photos of Jessica crying, claiming I was destroying their dream wedding. The extended family got involved. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone had an opinion about how selfish I was being. They conveniently forgot that Christopher had mocked the lake house for years, calling it that mosquito-infested shack and Grandpa's folly. Now suddenly it was his dream venue, the only place he could imagine starting his married life. The pressure intensified when they revealed they'd already told Jessica's family the wedding would be at the lake house. They'd sent save the dates with photos of the property. Christopher had promised her parents, who were apparently contributing $50,000 to the wedding, that they'd have exclusive use of the grounds for the entire wedding week. They'd booked vendors, arranged catering for 200 guests, and even hired a wedding planner who had already visited the property, without my permission, to scout locations for the ceremony. I found out about that last part when I arrived at the lake house one weekend to find strangers wandering around with clipboards and cameras. When I confronted them, they said Patricia had given them a key and told them I was traveling for business. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I tried one more time to be reasonable. I offered to host the wedding, let them use the property for free, even help with setup and coordination. But that wasn't enough. They wanted ownership. Christopher claimed he needed it as a foundation for his marriage, and that as the one carrying on the family name, as if that matters in 2024, he deserved the family property. My father said if I didn't transfer the deed, I'd be cut out of the will entirely and would never be welcome at any family gathering again. Fine, I told them. You want to play it that way? Game on. I contacted a developer who had been sending me offers for years. The property's location and acreage made it perfect for a small luxury resort development. Within 2 weeks, we had a deal, $2.3 million cash, closing in 30 days. The only condition I insisted on? Demolition begins immediately after closing. The closing date? 3 days before Christopher's wedding. But here's where I decided to go full nuclear. I didn't tell anyone about the sale. Instead, I played along. I told my parents I needed time to think it over and would give them my decision closer to the wedding. I even met with Christopher and Jessica to discuss the details of the transfer, letting them show me their Pinterest boards and venue layouts. I smiled and nodded as they discussed where the dance floor would go, how they'd string lights between the trees, where the photo booth would be stationed. Meanwhile, I was systematically removing everything of personal value from the property. Family photos, Grandpa's tools, the handmade furniture he'd crafted, his collection of vintage fishing lures, all quietly moved to a storage unit. I even carefully removed and preserved some of the original wood paneling from his study, the door from his workshop, and the custom stained glass window he'd installed for my grandmother's 40th birthday. The sale closed yesterday. As of 9 a.m. this morning, demolition crews were on site. The developer was eager to begin, as they have a tight timeline to break ground on the resort before winter. By the time Christopher's wedding guests arrive on Saturday, they'll find excavators instead of a lake house, construction barriers instead of a romantic venue, and a large sign announcing future site of Clearwater Luxury Resort and Spa. I've already received 17 missed calls from my parents since posting the development company's announcement on Facebook an hour ago. I tagged the entire family. My phone is exploding with text messages I haven't bothered to read. Christopher left a voicemail that was just screaming. With the proceeds from the sale, I've already purchased a new property, a small island in the Pacific Northwest, accessible only by boat or seaplane. It has a modest cottage that I'll renovate myself, just like Grandpa taught me. I've also set aside funds for advanced security systems and legal protections to ensure no family member can ever set foot on my property again. Some might say I'm burning bridges. I say I'm cauterizing wounds. They wanted the lake house more than they wanted me in their lives? Well, now they have neither. Christopher's wedding is in 3 days, and 200 guests are expecting to celebrate at a beautiful lakefront venue that no longer exists. The best part? Legally, I've done nothing wrong. The property was mine, free and clear. I had no obligation to inform anyone of my plans to sell. The developer has all the proper permits for demolition. Everything is above board, documented, and irreversible. Grandpa always told me, Michael, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. My family showed me that I'm nothing more to them than a resource to be exploited, a wallet to be emptied, a doormat to walk on. They chose Christopher's wedding over my dignity. They chose their entitlement over our relationship. So I chose myself. Update 1. The Wedding Day Aftermath. It's been 72 hours since my original post, and I need to update everyone on what happened. I'm currently writing this from a hotel in Seattle, on my way to my new island property. But first, let me tell you about the absolute catastrophe that was Christopher's wedding day. As I mentioned, the wedding was scheduled for Saturday. The demolition had begun Thursday morning. By Friday evening, the main house was completely gone. Nothing but rubble and exposed foundation. The demo crew, efficient as they were, had even started removing the dock and boathouse. The gorgeous oak trees that Jessica wanted to get married under? Marked for removal with bright orange X's. According to my cousin Tyler, who I'm still on speaking terms with, he never participated in the harassment, the first guests started arriving Friday afternoon for the welcome barbecue that was supposed to happen that evening. Christopher and Jessica had rented a block of rooms at a hotel about 20 minutes from the property, and the plan was for everyone to gather at the Lakehouse for a casual evening before the big day. Tyler was in the first car to arrive, along with some of Jessica's relatives from California. He said the look on their faces when they turned onto the property was something he'd never forget. Where the familiar gravel driveway used to wind through trees toward the house, there was now a widened construction road. Heavy machinery was parked where the lawn used to be. The house was a pile of debris with an excavator still picking through it like a metal dinosaur feeding on the carcass of my childhood memories. Jessica's father, Robert, apparently just sat in his car for 5 minutes, staring. Then he got out, walked up to the construction foreman, and started screaming about lawsuits and destruction of property. The foreman, God bless him, calmly explained that they had all the proper permits and that the property owner had sold the land for development. He even showed Robert the public record of the sale on his phone. That's when the calls to Christopher started. Christopher and Jessica were at the hotel with my parents, doing last-minute preparation. According to the hotel staff, I may have called and pretended to be a concerned relative. You could hear the screaming from the lobby. Christopher was apparently so shocked that he collapsed and had to be given water by the concierge. Jessica became hysterical, demanding to know what happened to their venue. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, decided the best course of action was to drive to the property themselves, convinced this was all some misunderstanding. They arrived to find more wedding guests milling around in confusion, some taking photos of the destruction, others on their phones trying to find alternate venues for 200 people with less than 24 hours' notice. My father, James, tried to pull rank, claiming he was the owner's father and demanding the construction stop immediately. The site supervisor, who I'd specifically briefed about potential family interference, informed him that I was no longer the owner and hadn't been for 3 days. He then pointed to the no trespassing signs and politely but firmly asked everyone to leave before he had to call the police. But here's where it gets even better. Jessica's parents had put down non-refundable deposits totaling $50,000 for catering, flowers, band, photography, and decoration rentals, all scheduled to arrive at a property that was now a construction site. The catering company showed up Saturday morning with trucks full of food. The florist arrived with $8,000 worth of arrangements. The band equipment trucks, the rental company with chairs, tables, and a dance floor, they all showed up to find bulldozers and debris. None of them would provide service without a venue, but they also wouldn't refund the deposits since it was less than 24 hours' notice. Jessica's father threatened to sue everyone, including me, but his lawyer apparently explained that since they'd made arrangements for a property they didn't own or have legal rights to, they had no case. The wedding was supposed to start at 4 p.m. on Saturday. At 3:45 p.m., Tyler texted me a photo from the hotel. It showed about 150 guests in formal wear crowded into the hotel's small conference room, which was the only space available on such short notice. Christopher was apparently trying to explain the situation to confused and angry guests, many of whom had traveled from out of state. But the real drama came from Jessica. According to multiple sources, she gave Christopher an ultimatum right there in front of everyone. Either he figures out how to fix this, or the wedding is off. When Christopher tried to explain that I had sold the property, she accused him of knowing about it and lying to her. She claimed no brother would do this without warning unless Christopher had done something horrible to deserve it. The truth started coming out then. Some guests began asking why I would do such a thing. My aunts, trying to defend the family, let slip that they'd been trying to convince me to give the property to Christopher. When Jessica's family learned that Christopher had been trying to manipulate me into giving him $1 million property as a wedding gift, they were horrified. Jessica's mother, Linda, apparently said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You told us Michael offered the Lakehouse as a wedding gift. You said he was thrilled to keep it in the family." The ceremony was eventually held in the conference room. Tyler said it was the most awkward wedding he'd ever attended. Half the guests left before the reception, which was just the hotel's restaurant with a limited menu because the actual catered food had to be thrown away. The band couldn't set up properly in the small space, so they had to use a Spotify playlist through a portable speaker. The photographer, trying to make the best of it, took some shots in the hotel parking lot. Jessica spent most of the reception crying. Christopher spent it drinking. My parents spent it fielding questions from relatives about why I wasn't there and what had really happened with the Lakehouse. The final twist came when the hotel presented them with the bill. Since they had to accommodate the sudden request for the conference room, provide food for 200 people, and deal with the chaos, the charges came to nearly $30,000. Christopher had assumed I would eventually cave and pay for everything as an apology. When the hotel manager asked for payment, he tried to call me. That's when he discovered I'd blocked his number, along with those of my parents and everyone else who had harassed me. Update 2. 6 months later, the complete fallout. It's been 6 months since the wedding disaster, and I'm writing this final update from my completed cottage on my private island in the San Juan Islands. The view from my deck is spectacular, nothing but water, mountains, and the occasional orca pod passing by. But before I talk about my new life, let me fill you in on the complete destruction of my former family. Christopher's marriage lasted exactly 73 days. According to Tyler, who has become my sole source of family information, the relationship never recovered from the wedding catastrophe. Jessica's family blamed Christopher for humiliating them in front of their entire social circle. The fact that they'd lost $50,000 in deposits was bad enough, but the social media disaster was worse. Apparently, several guests had live-tweeted the entire fiasco, and it went viral in their Connecticut community. Someone even created a TikTok series called The Lakehouse Wedding That Wasn't, which got over 3 million views. Jessica discovered through the viral posts that Christopher had lied about numerous things. He'd told her I was a trust fund kid who didn't need the property. He'd said our grandfather had verbally promised it to him before he died. He'd even claimed that I had initially agreed to give it to them but then got greedy. When the truth came out, that he'd orchestrated a harassment campaign to try to steal my inheritance, she was disgusted. The divorce filing was brutal. Jessica's lawyer argued that the marriage was based on fraud, citing Christopher's lies about the property and his misrepresentation of our family's wealth. She sought annulment rather than divorce, claiming she never would have married him if she'd known the truth about his character. She got it, along with the engagement ring and the wedding gifts, which Christopher had to pay taxes on even though he had to return them. But that was just the beginning of Christopher's downfall. It turns out that in his certainty that he'd get the Lakehouse, Christopher had made some serious financial miscalculations. He'd quit his stable job 3 months before the wedding, telling Jessica he was going to manage the Lakehouse as a vacation rental property. He'd already set up an LLC, created a website, and even taken bookings for the summer season, collecting nearly $40,000 in deposits from vacationers. When the property was demolished, he had to refund all that money he'd already spent on the wedding preparations and a new truck he'd bought to maintain the property. He had to sell the truck at a loss and borrow money from our parents to avoid fraud charges from the vacation renters. Speaking of our parents, their situation isn't much better. My father's construction business relied heavily on the family reputation in the community. When word got out about how they'd tried to force me to give away my inheritance, several longtime clients pulled their contracts. One major client, Mrs. Henderson, who had known our grandfather, was particularly disgusted. She'd been at Grandpa's funeral when he'd specifically talked about how proud he was that I would take care of his beloved Lakehouse. The financial hits kept coming. My parents had co-signed loans for Christopher, assuming he'd have rental income from the Lakehouse. They're now on the hook for nearly $100,000 in debt. My mother had to go back to work at 59, taking a position as a receptionist at a medical office. My father, at 61, is working longer hours than ever, trying to salvage what's left of his business and reputation. The extended family is completely fractured. My aunts, who had pushed me to give up the property, are now persona non grata at family gatherings after other relatives learned they'd known about the harassment campaign. One uncle, Charles, actually thanked me for exposing what he called the family's toxic entitlement problem. He admitted he'd been pressured to give Christopher a job at his company and was relieved to have a reason to refuse. The Lakehouse property development is proceeding on schedule. The Clearwater Luxury Resort broke ground in September, and the first phase is expected to open next summer. The developers sent me photos of the progress. They've maintained the natural beauty while creating something that will bring joy to hundreds of families. I feel like Grandpa would appreciate that, even if it wasn't our family anymore. As for me, I've never been happier. My island cottage renovation is complete. I did most of the work myself, just like Grandpa taught me. I installed solar panels for electricity, a sophisticated water filtration system, and even built my own dock. The cottage is smaller than the Lakehouse, just 2 bedrooms, but it's perfect for my needs. I've set up one room as a workshop where I'm learning to build custom furniture, something Grandpa always wanted to teach me but never got enough time to do. I work remotely now for a tech company that doesn't care where I live as long as I have internet. Starlink has been a game changer for island living. My days are spent coding, woodworking, fishing, and enjoying the absolute peace that comes from living somewhere my family can never reach me. I've also started therapy to deal with the years of family manipulation I hadn't even realized I'd endured. My therapist helped me understand that the Lakehouse situation was just the final straw in a lifetime of being treated as the responsible one who was expected to sacrifice for others' benefit. Christopher was always the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was expected to clean up his messes and enable his lifestyle. I've received probably 300 emails from various family members over these 6 months. I haven't read a single one. I had my lawyer send a cease and desist letter when the messages became threatening, and I've documented everything in case I need a restraining order. The only family member I maintain contact with is Tyler, and that's only because he respected my boundaries from day one and never asked me to reconsider. Last week, I got an unexpected call from my lawyer. Apparently, Christopher and my parents are exploring legal options to contest Grandpa's will retroactively, claiming I manipulated him into leaving me the Lakehouse. My lawyer laughed and said it's the desperate move of people who have nothing left to lose. The will was ironclad, Grandpa was of sound mind, and there's documented evidence of my relationship with him and the property spanning decades. The lawyer also informed me that Jessica is writing a book about her experience. It's tentatively titled 73 Days, A Marriage Built on Lies. Apparently, she's already got a publishing deal and is shopping around for movie rights. Christopher tried to get an injunction to stop it, but since everything she's writing is factual and documented, he has no case. I've given her lawyer permission to verify facts about the property sale and timeline. I figure if someone's going to profit from this mess, it might as well be one of the few innocent parties. I've been asked if I have any regrets. Honestly, My only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. I spent years trying to maintain relationships with people who only valued me for what I could provide. I exhausted myself trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I compromised my boundaries repeatedly in the name of family harmony. Selling that lake house didn't just free me from their expectations, it revealed their true nature to the world. They showed everyone that they valued a piece of property more than their son and brother. They destroyed their own lives through greed and entitlement, and I simply refused to cushion their fall. Grandpa left me that lake house because he knew I loved it for what it was, not what it was worth. In selling it, I honored his memory better than by letting it become a symbol of family manipulation and greed. I used his gift to buy my freedom, and I think he would have approved. I'm 34 now, financially independent, and living in a place of my own creation. I wake up every morning to the sound of waves and seabirds instead of demanding phone calls and guilt trips. I'm learning new skills, taking care of my mental health, and for the first time in my life, I'm living entirely on my own terms. To those who say I went too far, I ask, what's the appropriate response to people who try to steal your inheritance through emotional manipulation? What's the correct reaction to family members who value your assets more than your well-being? How should you handle people who threaten to disown you if you don't give them what they want? I found my answer. You give them exactly what they asked for. They wanted me out of the family if I didn't hand over the lake house. Well, they got their wish. The lake house is gone, and so am I. They can live with the consequences of their choices, just as I'm living with the freedom of mine. My therapist asked me last week if I think I'll ever reconcile with my family. I told her that some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some relationships are too toxic to salvage. Some people will never see you as anything more than a resource to exploit. But here's the thing about endings. They're also beginnings. The end of my relationship with my toxic family was the beginning of my relationship with myself. The demolition of the lake house was the foundation of my new life. The loss of my relatives was the discovery of my worth. I'm Michael, I'm 34, I own a private island, and I've never been happier. My family thought they could pressure me into giving away my inheritance. Instead, they got a front row seat to their own destruction. And me? I got the one thing money can't usually buy, complete and total freedom from people who never deserved me in the first place. To Christopher, if you're reading this, you wanted the lake house so badly that you were willing to destroy our brotherhood for it. Congratulations! You got exactly what you deserved. Nothing. To my parents, you raised me to be responsible, hardworking, and independent. Thank you for those lessons. I used them to build a life without you. And to Grandpa, wherever you are, thank you for seeing me, for loving me, and for giving me the means to escape. Your lake house is gone, but your legacy lives on in every nail I hammer, every fish I catch, and every sunset I watch from my own dock. You taught me that a man's worth isn't in what he owns, but in what he builds and who he becomes. I became someone who chooses himself. And that's the greatest inheritance of all.